The fundamental problem for many startups and people in general is that we are problem solvers. We are inclined to, oh, there's a problem, let's solve it. And especially engineers, that's like who you are, right? As an engineer, you when someone gives you a problem, you go and you come up with like 10 different ways how to solve it, and this is how people are, right? Like something happens in your life, it's like, oh my god, I'm going to solve it, and you go by solving it. And so that's what you see that when you have these teams and companies and whatever, like a group of people, everyone's jumping to the solutions. Like you're talking about the products, like how could we solve this? And I have a better idea how to solve things. But the problem side, it's much harder for people to grasp, it's much harder for people to understand. Is the problem a problem that only I have, or is it a problem that many more people have? And is it a problem that is very important or painful for others?
And how do you figure that out?
And there's, this is a very difficult thing, right? Because as I said, we're not wired. So you need to go out, you need to talk to people, you need to make sure that, of course, if you have experience in a certain industry and you've been through things and you've kind of lived the pain, that's why, many of the venture capitalists ask you, what's your background? Is it a relevant background, or is it something that, like you found a co-founder, or you just like think it's a pain, but you haven't really lived it for years? So it's a process. It's like, we have engineering process to build stuff. Once you figure out, okay, this is something we're building, you have the direction, and then you go and you do the right designs and testing. The building process. There is a process that you can follow on the problem side, which is make sure that you talk to people that are relevant, target segment to what you think your target segment is. Find them, interview them, and it's like there's a lot of psychology. And I feel like people don't really appreciate it this much, but think about all the psychoanalysts and we can go all the way to Freud, right? But it's a hard thing. You have many shrinks who don't really help you. The really good ones are the ones that kind of get to the core and they identify what's happening and what are the problems that people have. And in business it's the same thing. And so it's identification of the problem and then understanding how many people are there with the problem. And that's even harder, right? Because you might find one guy who has a problem and you can design and build the best solution ever, but he's just one guy. And you need to somehow figure out that there's many more people like him who are going to buy it. So my point is that this is the core, and this is startups and product management is kind of the same thing, because what product management fundamentally is to find the balance between product is just one piece. It's the problems and it's the people. The problems, like how important the people are, and is the problem painful enough? And then are there enough people in the market that for which I can build good enough solution? And so when you're just coming from the problem side, from the solution side, and you kind of ignore this, you might build a great product that doesn't solve a very important problem for no people. So that's kind of sad.
Sure.
And so this is this viability. This is the product market fit, by the way. Product market fit. Product and the market is the problems of the people. And so this product managers are just people who are kind of supposed to be in charge of making these decisions around like what is the problem worth pursuing, and then let's kind of figure out the best solution. Anyway, I know that I talk a lot. I'm very passionate about this because this is the core of entrepreneurship. Is let's find problems that are worth solving that many people have.
Yeah.
And
Sure. No, and that's super helpful. And it's in the panel that you were just on, Hubert. So that was in Czech, obviously. So really, if you think about what you just talked about for the last couple of minutes, and then what you were talking about on the panel in general, is there anything else that you were saying in Czech that you feel is really, what's the most important part of what you said in Czech that you haven't already spoken about tonight that you'd like to express in English?
I don't really remember like all the things we talked about it, few things that come to mind is, in general for startups, and we touched on it a little bit in terms of sharing and being open to other people's perspective. The fact that if you're closed and you're protecting things, it's hurting you. And it's not just like sharing your ideas, but it's actually trying to involve more people actively into your products. So, and this is like on the business level in terms of getting advisors that are relevant. And I've heard people like, oh, we need to get some advisors on the slide, on the slide for the pitch deck, right? To have some big names. And okay, that's obviously nice. It helps you from a brand perspective. But the more people you can actually get to be actively involved and give you advice, the better. And so it's the idea of sharing. And it's if you share, the more you share, the more people are interested in your success because you have shared goal. And so this goes, as I said, it's both for like investors or advisors, right? Like even if you have more investors, obviously there's a limit, right? If you have too many people, then it's difficult to find. So it shouldn't necessarily be a democracy in the sense that there are some hard strategic decisions that you need to make about the product, and if you have just like too many people, it's difficult to get an agreement, and it's kind of mediocre products could be created because of that. But it's also on the personal level. It's like each of the persons, on the team, it doesn't matter if you're an engineer, if you're a business guy, or designer. Like you should have a network of people that can help you. If you're working on something, you should have someone who you could like call up and say, hey, I'm solving this problem. What do you think? And and this is not unidirectional. These relationships are bidirectional because then you can contribute to others, and it's like it's balanced, right? And so, like the older you are in life, the more you progress in your career, who you are is not just you as an individual person, is the network of people you have. And so I remember from one guy who was a very senior guy, and he gave me this advice early on. He said, of course, focus on improving your skills. Try to be focused and build expertise in a narrow area, because if you're just doing too many things at the same time, you're not expert in a single one. But don't just focus on building your expertise. Focus on building a network of people. Because then, if someone wants to hire you, or you're looking for a new team to join as a co-founder, you have this support network and people that you can bring with. And you know how it is, right? Like you've been around and people follow you, right? Like yeah, Mark is a cool guy. I worked with him before, and like I'm gonna work with him, or I'm at least gonna help him if I'm not in a position to jump to a new company. And so I feel like we touched on it a little bit, but this is speaking from a Czech perspective. People are not that open, and maybe it goes back to the roots of the culture and the history that the country and the region went through. But I feel like people are closed, and they are not open. And one other thing that I've seen that might be relevant for more of the technical people, that we now have these channels that allow us to follow people on Twitter, and you have like coding casts, right, like live streaming of what people are coding and so on. So you can very quickly kind of learn what other people are saying, but there's nothing like having a real relationship with the people. Because it's a very different thing if like of someone, and it's a great thing, it's the first step, right? Like find the people that are the best influencers and the best minds in the world. That's why we're learning so much faster, why everything's accelerating, because like we can share the best ideas so much faster. But if you can actually meet the guy and talk to him, and the relationship changes, right?
And that's exactly what happened when Andre and I met with you just 2 weeks ago or so. We had lunch, and for Andre and me, it was just a great learning session. When you were talking about product management, how you do it, what's really critical in it, and that's there's a professor at the school that I went to, and he said, right, and he said we learn the best way to learn in life is from other people. And that was just like Andre and me sitting down with you over lunch. It's an hour lunch, And without exaggeration, it changed our company. I'm saying that sincerely.
I'm glad to hear
Okay.
that. Yeah.
We went back and Andre and I were like, we really need to dive into this more deeply. We need to communicate what we're learning here from the user testing and how it is affecting the product, and how and connect Brno to connect our team in Brno to that.
Yeah.
Because we weren't connected enough. So that was very interesting for us. And so I would say one question that I would have also is, so since the panel finished that you were just on, you've been on your phone.
Yeah.
Immersed in your phone,
Yeah.
and you just told me before we started this that you just had a price. You announced that you're going to start charging for your product.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and what's going on and
Sure.
what's the reaction been?
Yeah. I mean, we're an early stage startup, and it's a product management platform. That's why you're probably talking to me about product management, because our goal is really to help people make products that people really want, as opposed to wasting time building features and products that nobody needs and uses. And so the stage that we are in as a company is that we iterated, we did a lot of interviews and built prototypes and tested a lot of the functionality with early customers or users, I should say. And then eventually we got to the point when we needed to start testing the willingness to pay, and what is it worth in terms of dollars to the people, right? And if they're willing to pay for the product and so on. And so we've been in close touch with some of the private beta. We're in the private beta stage customers, and really talking about how much it's worth to them, and you're asking all these hard questions like if I tell you that we shut down the product tomorrow, how much it's worth to you.
Sure.
You're just psychologically trying to really get to the point of willingness to pay. It like an MBA, there's zillion theories how to do this. So where we are right now is that I just sent a message to a larger user base saying, hey, this is happening. This is a transition. We are launching so many more new features, and we're going to be opening the product publicly. And with that, we're going to be charging. And this is the pricing structure. This is what's happening. And you kind of need to explain that to people. You need to explain why. Because everyone has different, obviously, interests there, right? People want to pay as little for the most value they can get. Anyway, so the reason why I was on the phone was I wasn't trying to be rude. No. People are getting back now, responding to this, right? And so you just need to react quickly, and it's a global business, right? It doesn't matter that we're sitting here in Silicon Valley and the thing is in Prague. We have customers in New Zealand and London, whatever, in Silicon Valley, around the world.
Sure.
It's kind of the disadvantage of being a global company, right?
Sure.
So yeah, that's happening, and that's it's part of life. So it's again, this is something that's maybe not as appreciated from the region where we are, because we have brilliant Czech Republic. We have brilliant technical talent.
Exactly.
But the part of selling it, and figuring out, how to sell it, what the pricing is, the go-to-market strategy, the positioning, the differentiation, the really the laser-focused segmentation, that's a lot of work. That's hard work. And I'm sure you could come up with a long list of companies that failed because they didn't figure out the focus, and they were building too many things for too many people at the same time, and then you run out of money and you die. And so doing this right and testing it, not spending too much money upfront on marketing and sales if you don't know that it's going to convert, the people are going to convert. Again, appreciation for this, and so I worked for this company, Good Data, before, and it was it was a very strong engineering component of the company.
Also a Czech company.
And Czech company, right? And you had the challenge. It was multiplied. It was R&D versus business, Czech Republic versus US, Um, and it's just the the only way how to bridge, like you need to bridge this gap and to kind of like explain to people, hey, this is what's going on both sides, right? This is not one way, by the way. Like we sometimes talk about, okay, we need to bring the Czech engineers here so that they will see the business. That's right, of course, but likewise, from the business side, you should bring people to appreciate the different culture in Central Europe. Because then you need, two people are talking, right? And they should both speak the same language,
Yeah.
local language. Um, how's the joke? US and UK is the, was it same nation divided by common language?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
So you have that, and there's the same language. Oh, the language is the third thing, right?
Sure.
So that's even worse. Anyway, that's my opinion.
And so how did you decide to start charging now? How did you strategically come to that decision now? And how did you set the price?
So this is a difficult question because it depends what the product is. This is like the answer is not universal, right? Like, in some cases, in general, we're gonna go to MVP and people are gonna roll their eyes and so on, but in general, the product has to have create enough value for the users. The mistake that people do is that they build a super crappy product that is just like part of the functionality, but part of a viable product is not just the functionality, it's also how you present it. Is it not just functional, but is it also reliable, and is it usable and delightful? Right? If I show you something that's super crappy and it's got some functionality but it's kind of completely unusable, what am I going to find out? I'm going to find out, this is not viable, right? And so if you, Steve Blank would tell you like charge right away, right? Steve Blank was my professor at Berkeley, and he would say this story where he said that he was working on a banking financial software, and he would walk into a bank and he had no idea how much to charge. And he was there at the VP, whatever, right, the bank, someone from the bank, and he just said, so he asked how much it is, and he said, it's $1 million. And the person on the other side of the table, like having no idea, right? Like how much it's really worth, because it's a bank, it's like a unique environment and so on. And the other person said, okay, is it per month? And he said, of course. Of course.
It's weekly. It's weekly. Yeah.
So this kind of, it's a joke, right?
Sure.
And, Steve Black, he's a great guy. But I mean, he tells us a story that happened. So my point is that you need to have a product. You asked me first, like, why did I decide to start now? It's because we felt, and we have the feedback from people. People started using it, and they started using it on like actively. And so we started to have that conversation around, like, how much it's worth, and we started doing the research.
And that's how you ended up choosing the price to launch with.
Right, and then the price is obviously there's multiple things. Like you should never charge based on the cost structure. I mean, it should be always value-based pricing. So like the idea is like, let's calculate the cost and the margins. That's the wrong way how to price products. So you need to think about the value that it creates to the business, to the customers. But it's kind of in the ideal world. In the real world, you have competitors that kind of create a frame of reference for these people, right? So to give you a relevant example that people can provide, when I was in Good Data, it was analytics platform, and we did analytics for Salesforce, for sales data. And so you could argue that there's a lot of value in analyzing the sales data and telling people like, hey, you could improve here, and there's some projections, and you can do some predictions and so on. But no matter what, people will always think about, wait a minute, how much am I paying for Salesforce in the first place on a monthly basis, and how much more I would pay for analytics? And you could argue that the value is actually bigger for getting these insights than just like paying on a monthly basis, per user. but you need to overcome that, right? The frame is there; it's a strong framing problem. So anyway, so in the pricing, there's a lot of, again, science as well as art in terms of how you frame it. You know, how you choose or how you try to make people to compare you to something else, right? Like, you know, you should understand your customer's mind and figure out if the frame that they have in mind right now kind of initially is too low. You want to make sure that you say, but we are not, this is not the group, the category that we're in. You know, figure out different higher price point that you can justify. Anyway, this might be too abstract, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that there's a lot of complexity in this, and then what customer competition is charging, and all that. So you need to somehow balance that and figure out ultimately the price point. Plus, it's not something that stay fixed, right? Like the pricing goes through evolution, it changes, you test it, you get more data. It's a continuous learning process, right? Even just, sorry, about the last point. Whether the pricing is public or private depends. B2B, large enterprises, you might not want to have a pricing, public pricing. Depends on the business model.
Sure. And you used the phrase earlier, Hubert, MVP, which probably most people know, but in case anyone doesn't, stands for a minimum viable product. And so you also said that you had Stephen Blank as a professor at Berkeley. For those that don't know, he's definitely one of the biggest thought leaders here in Silicon Valley. Great book that we love, which is his 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And so, because you've had him as a professor, what would be the 1 or 2 most important things that you learned from him?
He's a guy who understands technology, but he's fundamentally a marketer. Like what he teaches is for the people who are working on the products, and it doesn't matter, I mean the founders obviously, but designers and engineers, everyone who's working on the product, to get into the minds of the consumers. Because if you don't know that, it's impossible for you to figure out a better solution. If you don't understand what the people need, how are you gonna design a better solution? So he was amazing at forcing people to get out of the building, as he's known for that. The way he teaches it now, he kind of evolved it. He makes the teams in the classroom to go out and conduct 100 interviews.
Wow.
So you need to get out, and talk to the people. And it's initially super uncomfortable, right? You can imagine, right? And I understand that if you're behind the screen and your primary job is engineering, maybe you don't need to be the guy who's on the front lines and talking to the customers all the time. But you need to somehow find a way how to understand what the people need. So you can just sit on the calls and so on. So you have researchers who are experts in how to conduct these interviews, but you should be involved and listen to what's happening and how people are reacting and so on. Because there's a huge waste in having the brilliant engineering mindset and talent and not showing the full context of the problem and the people that have these problems to these engineers and the minds. It's like, if you just create a specification, and it doesn't matter if it's a founder, CEO, or if someone just shows up and says, hey, build this feature, you're wasting the brain capacity of the people who could come up with so much better solution.
Yeah.
So this is, and this is fundamentally, this is the core principle, like the MVP, the minimum viable product, and the lean startup. It's all about testing things and understanding, like learn, build, measure, loop. And so what I see there is that if you really want to be the best engineer in the world, you should learn how to learn about the problems of the people. Because if you don't understand that, there's no way you're going to build the best solution. It just doesn't work. So what, if you look at Steve Jobs, what he did was like they were, there's this like notion that Apple doesn't do user testing and research, so that's bullshit, right?
Sure.
Listen to any video of Johnny Ive talking about how many prototypes they built, and they held it in their hands, and so they go and they try, and so but it's tied together, right? It's not like if you're the type of person who just like builds something that's being told to you, and you're not interested in why you're building it and for whom. I mean, you just fundamentally doomed yourself for never ever building the best possible solution. Maybe it's the best possible like deliverable for the assignment, but that's not what is ultimate goal, right? And so that's the difference between what Apple and Samsung are doing. That it's about really understanding the problems of the people and not willing to sacrifice or just like let's deliver something quickly. And so it's in my perspective, it's just like everything's tied together. And even if you're more based, like I talked about the products, the problems, and the people, and if your expertise is building the products, make sure that you know the context, and vice versa. If you're a product or business guy who doesn't understand what the product can do and what is possible, then wouldn't it be great to build teleport? Yeah, it would be great. And you can say, let's start a company. Hey, Mark, we want to be co-founder of Teleport. Yeah, we can give it a shot.
Sure.
It's going to be probably really fucking hard. So, having that, and there lies the appreciation, right? Appreciate that the people who are on the front lines trying to understand the problems and the market, the people are fundamental to the success in the same way the engineers are. And I feel that many people kind of don't live by this. By people, I mean really companies and teams, right? The teams should be, and that's what you described, like that people should be working as units. It should be like the unit is the engineer who's an expert in building stuff. It's the business guy, product manager, or whatever the title is, who might be better equipped in his skills in interviewing and understanding the market. Designer who's gonna be really making sure that the design's right and understanding the patterns and all that. But it should be a unit. It should never be go figure it out and then come back and do just like their requirements.
Sure. And in product management, you do all and at Corinth we're doing the same thing. So you're doing all this user testing. You're getting all this input. How do you prioritize what functionality to add?
So this questions comes all the time, right? Like how do I put together a roadmap? And it's like the roadmap is just the ultimate visualization. It's just like what you share as an end result of like a plan going forward. By the way, the idea that you plan a long time ahead is false because there's no way how to predict what's going to happen and you're going to be way off. But the decision about what to prioritize is surprisingly easy once you know what the strategy is. And so the strategy, I'm going to repeat myself, but the strategy is that you had to clearly define what the problem is, what the market is, and then figure out a solution. And what I mean by that is that, to give you an example, right? Think about you want to run a business Airbnb apartment. That's a business idea, right? Like, okay, you're gonna buy an apartment, you're gonna be, let's say that you want to build it, you want to build an apartment and so on, and you need to figure out how to furnish the apartment and what the structure should be in order for the Airbnb to be a very popular and desirable location for people to go to. And then so you go out and you talk to people, and one person tells you, oh, it absolutely has to have a bathtub, and the other person says, I don't care about a bathtub, it has to have a shower, I never use bathtub. And then the third person tells you, oh, I love fireplaces, it has to have a fireplace. And so you go to people and you talk to all of them, and everyone kind of has a little different desires, right? Because they have different problems. Maybe the person for a bathtub has a child and used to bathe, whatever, right? But your And so think about it, you're there sitting, and the more people you talk to, if it's a heterogeneous market, people will have different requests, right? Or like problems. We're talking about problems. So what is it that they're trying to get done? Is it a business traveler? Is it a family visiting a town? Or is it a student just like going to Vegas to party? So you need to decide which market is your market, right? If you're gonna be building Airbnb for students in Vegas, going whatever spring break weekend, it's gonna be a very different Airbnb than if you wanna build Airbnb here in the mountains for a family for a vacation. And so my point is that you need to make this decision up front. You need to decide who's the segment that you're going after and what are the problems that you're gonna satisfy for them. And then the prioritization is much easier, because if you know that you're building an Airbnb for a family in the mountains, you're just gonna say no to all the party people requests.
Yeah.
And so then the universe of things that you could build shrinks down, and then within that you're just like deciding, well, what's the best, like what is gonna bring the most value, but for a much smaller segment and focus. And so again, this is a complex thing, but the prioritization itself needs to be based on a very solid strategy. And again, you see companies that are afraid to put all the eggs in one basket, and they are afraid to focus. And that's a recipe for failure. Because of course you could build an Airbnb that will have all the stuff, but it would have to be an Airbnb with 10 rooms and all the different things, and it's not gonna be good. It's gonna be like shitty, because it's not gonna be great for any single segment.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, especially in tech and software, we see this all the time, because it's so easy to add another feature into the product. Because it's like, oh yeah, of course, like there's this customer, he's willing to pay us money, so and it's just like this one feature, let's throw it in. But you're tarnishing the experience for everyone else, right? Like it has a negative impact, right? Unless you can really, in the UI and in the experience of the product, like completely separate it to make sure that it's the person's never exposed, the other segment's never exposed to the functionality, you shouldn't do it. And that's back to Apple, right? That's what they're good at. They're good at simplicity and leaving things out. As opposed to just like, let's pile in features.
Yeah.
So that the prioritization, if you have a clear strategy, if you have the right lenses, simplicity, delightfulness, depending on what the product is, then you can make the prioritization decisions.
Sure. Last two questions, Hubert. So, your company that you have founded, Product Board.
Yeah.
What is the unique problem that your company is solving?
Yeah, I might have touched on it, but it's really, we are helping teams to make the right decision. So what we just described, you asked me about the prioritization. This is the problem that we're helping product leaders. Because product manager, it can be product marketing manager, product manager, it can be strategy, head of strategy. In some cases, it's the head of R&D, engineering. The type is different. But we are helping them to make the right decisions around what features should be built and why. So the triangle, again, like you have a long list of stuff in the backlog, but you need to decide what is the right thing to build. And so there are many tools out there that help with the engineering part of the process, right? They'll help with getting stuff from the backlog and put it through like engineering pipeline and design, development, testing, deployment, and all that. But before that, there is this business side of the decision making, and that's the business product management side. Just like, wow, is it a good idea to build, a feature like this? Like, why is there a problem that's relevant? Is it a problem that's a problem relevant for the target market that we defined and that we're going after? And so this is usually kind of a very messy situation, and people have it in their heads. And I've done so many workshops with people that you put together the people, and you put the designer, developer, head of R&D, the CEO, head of sales, and so on, and you just ask them, guys, so what is the target segment, and where's your focus in terms of problem? And they're like dog, blah 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 blah, and then you try to put it on the wall and like like clearly define the prioritization or like the strategy, and you find out that everyone has a completely different opinion about it.
Yeah.
Because this is this softish kind of thing, that is not well formulated, and so that's. Sorry, it was a long response.
No,
I could have given
super.
you like a 30-second pitch, but I felt like this requires a little deeper.
No, thank you for that. That was very helpful. And you made me think of one other thing, which is in addition to Apple, what are the other companies do you think do an excellent job at product management that we should look to as models?
Right. I mean, there are. So if you think about what is what defines a good product management, it means that it's really products that are used and that are simple and that are really targeted at the specific jobs that people are trying to get done. Mm. So from that perspective, right, the more the product is bloated and more difficult to use and thus less usable and so on, that's the definition of bad design. So we actually see quite a lot of products that are well designed, like even like simple mobile applications that are well designed for a specific use case. Mm. And I can say Slack for communication, and I have an opinion about why it's successful and why it's different and so on. But the key thing is to be focused on that one thing that is important. And obviously, like if you're building a platform company, it's different, right? It's like this is a very different, difficult question because there's different business models, and so what is considered like a great product management differs in among different companies. But I know I've seen the startup Front app. They're it's a new company, right? It's from YC Batch.
Yeah.
And they seem to be very focused on what they're doing, like centralizing, communication from multiple channels. And I mean, you guys can check it out. But I like the simplicity. Mm. The danger is how to stay there, because as you get older as a company or more mature, you just keep adding stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like when you look at what Google's doing right now, breaking down the company into multiple smaller companies, that's to stay competitive and to kind of escape the dilemma, the innovator's dilemma, and be able to innovate and have independent groups rather than one company focused on margins and so on. So this is like right off Clayton Christensen's cookbook. Yeah. So. And I'm sure that you could find many other examples, right? Mm-hmm. But it's always like, where do you stop? Because the natural thing is to add more. Just like we start with this products for one specific job, and then we added all the ancillary stuff around, and it ultimately hinders that core value. Mm. So you need to be smart about. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go after it, but maybe it should be a separate product. You just shouldn't try to fit everything in the same product. And then you're like, should it be the same brand? Should it be a different brand? Like how do you position it in the market and so on? Because I mean, humans, we have this. The way we comprehend world is that we think in terms of associations, and we create we think about objects, right? And so. If there's an app, you create an association with that app. So look at what Facebook is doing. The good example of a good product strategy there is they are not trying to integrate Instagram with Facebook. They could, right? But the thing is that when you think of Facebook, you are thinking fundamentally as a social network to stay in touch with your friends and be social. It's like friendship but online. Yeah. And the Instagram is a different job. It's like I want to share photos, experiences, and so on. WhatsApp, it's a different. The goal is not to integrate it all. It's like separate things because we have different associations with these products. And so the companies that are succeeding are the companies that are aware of that, and they are not trying to add more functionality into the same product, but they break it down into specialized products. Again, there's a balance, and there's situations where Swiss Knife is a multiple features in one product, but it is a use case, right?
Sure.
For camping somewhere.
Sure, and it's interesting too, Hubert, that we see from the user testing that we've been doing. So with adults, and if we talk to teachers around the world or parents, they're using Facebook as their social platform, or it's one of their social media that they're using on a regular basis. And then we're talking to students who are in, maybe they're 12 years old, 14 years old, 16 years old. They're not using Facebook. They're using Instagram and Snapchat. So, and maybe some others, maybe Twitter, maybe YouTube as well. Yeah. But it's exactly to your point, which is really interesting. And also, I just think earlier when you were talking about focusing on, a phrase that we use that we like is focusing on your most valuable customers, and we do that as well, which I think is what you were describing earlier. Figure out who your most valuable customers are, and then what functionality is most important to them. Sounds like a good approach.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
The key is to be very specific and very targeted in who the customer is.
Yeah.
Because you see all these value propositions this product is for anyone who wants to da 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 da.
Yeah.
That's too broad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's it's not for anyone. It's there's a very specific. I'm sure that you could figure out very specific descriptive characteristics.
Yeah.
If you think about Tesla's first electric car, it wasn't a car for anyone. It was a car for car enthusiasts who didn't care about how big the trunk was. They wanted to have I own a cool car. I put pride into how I'm maybe perceived. I like the acceleration and so on.
Yeah.
And by the way, I also get the benefit of being green. And all that,
Sure.
some people
Sure.
maybe did it just for that, but
Sure.
my point is that it's a very specific segment.
Yeah.
The same thing is with software, the same thing with any product.
Yeah. Sure. Last question, Hubert. So you're Czech.
Yeah.
You have lived here in Silicon Valley for how many years?
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
You have an American wife.
Yeah.
So you know both worlds very well. So what would you say then, if you think about, let's say, in terms of cultural ideas, in terms of the Czech Republic, what is it that you think that the Czechs do particularly well that are kind of their biggest strengths?
Okay. Along the lines of what we talked about, problem solving is definitely a strength.
Yeah.
Ability to figure out, solutions for super complicated problems.
Yeah.
And being creative from the technical perspective. Really combine things. Also, one thing that I think is, compared to the US specifically, is different that engineers from, and this is more Central Europe maybe, or Germany maybe as well, but it's the breadth of knowledge that it's engineers from that region. The education is kind of the more classical education, which has disadvantages, but one of the advantages is that you can combine the knowledge from the different areas, and so it gives you better perspective. Whereas someone who just knows only the one thing and has never learned about anything else, we have a very good kind of the classical education. Austrian-Hungarian Empire is kind of a culprit, or we can thank to them. And I see that it gives broader perspective, and so I like that. I know that if I'm gonna talk to a person, the person is not gonna be very narrowly minded. At work, then it means obviously the more you focus, the better. Than just limitations to what we can do as humans. And then I think that the differences, and this is not Czech and American, but I have this theory about big nations and small nations. And if you look at Jan Masaryk and his was the son of Tomáš Masaryk, he talks about this as well, is that the Czech countries so small that we need to care about what's happening elsewhere in the world. And if you look at the time shift, the pie that you have, that you're thinking about what's going on, there's very little happening in our region, so we know much more about the other world. If you're a big member of a big nation, whatever it is, right? U.S., Brazil, Russia, China. There's so much happening internally that the time that you can dedicate to the smaller countries, that it's impossible to know everything that's happening.
Sure.
So this gives us better understanding of what's going on, and that's something that we can contribute. And I think that we just should understand that people coming from bigger countries, they have a little less time to be interested in every single small country and area in the world. So just appreciate that. It's an advantage for us to know much more about more countries and places in the world. On the other hand, we shouldn't just we should understand that Americans and bigger countries.
This has been super helpful. Thank you so much, Hubert.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for your advice.
Of course.